The conference
As you can
room on the
see, our
15th
revenue
floor of
projections
Thornton
continues to
Biomed
decline.
headquarters
We must
smelled
address
like
this
expensive
urgently.
coffee and
I'm sorry,
tension.
the results are positive.
Sarah Thornton
God, are you
stood at the
sure?
head of the mahogany
I'm
table,
so sorry.
laser pointer steady
We
in
have
her
to go.
hand as she
Now.
directed the
But the
red
storm is
dot
getting
toward
worse.
the
I'm
declining revenue
scared.
chart
I'll keep you
projected
safe.
on the screen. Her tailored Brooks Brothers suit, charcoal gray, precisely fitted, didn't move as she spoke. Q4 revenue down 12%, operating costs up 8%. This is unacceptable. Robert Price, the CFO, shifted in his leather chair. His fingers drummed against the quarterly report, leaving small sweat marks on the glossy cover. He'd worked for Thornton Biomed for 15 years, long enough to know that when Sarah Thornton's voice dropped to that particular register, calm, controlled, cold, someone was about to get eviscerated. Robert, you told this board that cost-cutting measures would offset R&D expenses. Clearly they didn't. Explanation. Now. The older man cleared his throat. Sarah, the AR-47 trial delays pushed our timeline back 6 months. We had to hire additional researchers, extend testing protocols. I didn't ask for excuses. I asked for an explanation of why your projections were wrong. Margaret Winters sat at the far end of the table, silver hair cut in a severe bob that framed her 64-year-old face like a helmet. She wore a navy suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and her platinum wedding ring, worn every day for the 6 years since her husband's death, caught the overhead lights as she tapped one manicured finger against the polished wood. Sarah, perhaps if we had released AR-47 on schedule, instead of indulging in excessive safety testing, we wouldn't be in this position. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sarah turned toward her mother with a kind of precise movement that came from years of maintaining perfect control in rooms full of people waiting for her to fail. Mother, we've discussed this. 8% of trial participants showed adverse reactions. I will not rush a medication to market knowing it could harm children. Margaret's smile could have frozen the Charles River in July. Noble. But shareholders don't care about nobility. They care about returns. And right now, we're losing to GenMed. Vanessa Chen, the COO, leaned forward. At 34, she was young enough to be hungry and smart enough to hide it most of the time. Margaret's right. GenMed's asthma drug launches in Q2. If we don't accelerate AR-47, we lose first-mover advantage. Sarah's gaze shifted to Vanessa for exactly 1 second, long enough to convey everything she thought about ambitious young executives who hadn't earned the right to challenge her. Vanessa, when you've spent 15 years building this company's reputation like I have, then you can lecture me on strategy. The iPhone on the table vibrated, dancing slightly against the wood. Sarah glanced down at the screen. Boston Children's Hospital, Emergency Department. Her heart rate spiked. Her daughter's school was supposed to call her first. The hospital calling directly meant, "Excuse me, I need to take this." She walked out of the conference room with the same measured pace she used for everything, her Stuart Weitzman heels clicking against marble with metronomic precision. Only when the soundproof glass door closed behind her did she allow her hand to shake as she pressed the green button. "This is Sarah Thornton." The voice on the other end belonged to a woman who delivered bad news before and knew how to do it efficiently. "Miss Thornton, this is Nurse Davis from Boston Children's ER. Lily was brought in by ambulance at 2:47 p.m. She's experiencing a severe asthma exacerbation. Oxygen saturation is 88% and not responding to initial nebulizer treatment." Sarah's medical knowledge, limited but sufficient, kicked in. Anything below 90% meant her daughter's cells weren't getting enough oxygen. Below 85, and brain damage became a concern. Her 7-year-old daughter was 2 percentage points away from permanent injury. That's critical. We're starting continuous albuterol and considering ICU transfer if she doesn't improve in the next 15 minutes. How soon can you get here? Sarah checked her Rolex. 3:03 p.m. Downtown Boston to Longwood Medical Area, traffic permitting. 10 minutes. I'll be there in 10. Miss Thornton, I need verbal consent to administer IV steroids if the nebulizer fails. Yes. Do whatever you need. Just keep my daughter alive. She ended the call and pressed her forehead against the cool glass window overlooking Boston Harbor. 18 stories below, people walked to their cars, checked their phones, lived their ordinary lives. None of them knew that Sarah Thornton, CEO, board member, featured in Forbes' 40 Under 40 3 years running, was about to fall apart in a corporate hallway. Through the glass, Margaret was watching her with the expression she'd worn throughout Sarah's childhood. Disappointment wrapped in expectation. Sarah pushed open the conference room door. Meeting adjourned. Robert, email me the revised projections by 6 p.m. Vanessa, reschedule the GenMed call to Monday. Margaret stood. Sarah, we have 3 more agenda items. The board is waiting for your leadership. The words came out before Sarah could stop them, before the CEO mask could slide back into place. Lily is in the ER. Oxygen saturation at 88%. I'm leaving. Now. Margaret's voice could have etched glass. Lily has been in the ER 4 times this year. She has nannies, doctors, nurses. She doesn't need you sitting there holding her hand. This company does need you. The silence that followed felt like the moment before a grenade detonates. Every board member suddenly found their notes fascinating. Robert Price studied his coffee cup. Vanessa's eyes darted between mother and daughter like someone watching a tennis match where both players were armed. Sarah grabbed her coach bag from the chair. You want to know why I'm not the CEO you wanted, Mother? Because I refuse to be the mother you were. The elevator ride down took 43 seconds. Sarah counted each one, watching the numbers descend, willing them to move faster. When the doors opened to the parking garage, she ran, actually ran, something she hadn't done in heels since the day she'd argued her thesis at MIT, to her Mercedes S-Class. The drive to Boston Children's Hospital took 11 minutes. She broke 4 traffic laws and didn't care about any of them. The emergency department smelled like antiseptic and fear. Sarah had been here 4 times in the past 6 months, and each time the smell triggered the same visceral response. Her daughter couldn't breathe, might die, needed her, and Sarah had been somewhere else being important. Lily Thornton. I'm her mother. The intake nurse, a woman in purple scrubs with kind eyes, gestured toward the trauma bays. Room 3. But ma'am, the respiratory therapist is still working with her. You might want to wait. Sarah didn't wait. She pushed through the double doors, past a resident who tried to intercept her, straight to the room where machines beeped and her daughter struggled for air. The scene that greeted her would replay in her mind for weeks. Lily, 7 years old and small for her age, lay on a gurney with her face obscured by an oxygen mask. Her thin chest heaved with each breath, the retractions between her ribs visible even through her school uniform. The monitor above the bed displayed numbers that Sarah had learned to fear. Oxygen saturation, 89%. Heart rate, 142. Respiratory rate, 34. But what stopped Sarah in the doorway wasn't the medical equipment or her daughter's distress. It was the man standing beside the bed. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with brown hair that curled slightly at the ends, and a neatly trimmed beard. Navy blue scrubs stretched across broad shoulders that looked more suited to a construction site than a hospital. His hands, large and calloused in ways that surprised her, held Lily's small fingers with impossible gentleness. His voice, when he spoke, was low and calm, like he was discussing the weather instead of a child fighting to breathe. Lily, sweetheart, I need you to breathe with me. In for 2, hold for 1, out for 3. You're doing great. Look at the monitor. Your oxygen is climbing. 90%. See? You're already winning. Lily's eyes, her father's eyes, blue and bright even through tears, fixed on the man's face with the kind of trust Sarah hadn't seen her daughter give anyone in months. I can't. It hurts. I know it hurts, brave girl. But here's the thing about your lungs. They're fighters, just like you. Every breath you take is you telling this asthma attack that you're stronger than it is. And you know what? You're right. Look, 91% now. Sarah stood frozen, watching a stranger calm her daughter with nothing but words and presence. The Emily Dickinson quote her father used to say floated through her mind unbidden. Hope is the thing with feathers. This man was giving Lily hope with a voice that made breathing sound possible again. Lily turned her head slightly and saw Sarah in the doorway. Mom. The single word carried so much weight. Relief, fear, surprise that Sarah had actually come. It hit like a physical blow. Baby, I'm here. The man, she could see his hospital badge now, Michael Cooper, RN, pediatric respiratory specialist, looked up and met her eyes for the first time. His assessment was instant and thorough. Expensive suit, designer bag, Rolex, the kind of woman who showed up late to her own daughter's emergencies. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. Miss Thornton, Lily is stabilizing. If you could wait outside while I complete the treatment protocol, I'll brief you in approximately 10 minutes. It wasn't a suggestion. Sarah, who gave orders to rooms full of executives and board members, who'd built a pharmaceutical empire on the ability to command respect and obedience, found herself being politely but firmly dismissed by a nurse in a pediatric ER. I want to stay with my daughter. Michael's voice remained professional, but there was steel underneath. With oxygen levels still recovering, we need to minimize the number of people in the room. Too many bodies means less available oxygen for the patient. 10 minutes, Miss Thornton. I'll come find you. Sarah looked at Lily, hoping her daughter would reach for her, would insist that she stay. Instead, Lily's hand tightened around Michael's fingers. Mr. Mike will take care of me. It's okay, Mom. The hallway outside room 3 had uncomfortable plastic chairs and outdated magazines. Sarah sat in one and tried not to count the minutes. Her phone buzzed with messages, Robert asking about the projections, Vanessa requesting clarification on Monday's schedule, Margaret demanding she return to the office immediately. She ignored all of them and stared at the door behind which her daughter trusted a stranger more than her own mother. 12 minutes later, Michael emerged. He'd removed his gloves and carried a tablet displaying Lily's chart. Up close, Sarah could see he was older than she'd first thought. Late 30s, maybe, with fine lines around his eyes that suggested someone who smiled often. He wasn't smiling now. Lily's stable. Oxygen saturation is holding at 95%. We've administered continuous albuterol and ipratropium bromide via nebulizer, and she's responding well. Dr. Rodriguez will be here in 20 minutes to do a full assessment, but I'm recommending overnight observation. Sarah stood. I want to speak with the attending physician. Something flickered across Michael's face, an expression she couldn't quite read, somewhere between amusement and annoyance. I am Lily's respiratory specialist, Ms. Thornton. Dr. Rodriguez will confirm my recommendations, but the treatment decisions go through me. I have 15 years of experience managing pediatric asthma cases. You're a nurse. The words came out wrong. Not a question, more like an accusation. Michael's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm a registered nurse with specialized certification in pediatric respiratory care, which means I've spent more time managing acute asthma exacerbations than most physicians. Now, if you'd like to wait for Dr. Rodriguez, that's your right. But Lily trusts me, and in my experience, Patient trust is half the battle in pediatric emergencies. Sarah felt heat rise to her face. I apologize. I didn't mean to imply. Thank you. Thank you for saving my daughter. Michael's expression softened fractionally. That's my job. But with all due respect, Ms. Thornton, Lily needs more than emergency interventions. This is her 4th admission in 6 months. That pattern suggests her asthma isn't being properly managed at home. She has the best medications, the best pediatric pulmonologist in Boston. She has things. What she doesn't have is consistent oversight. Every time she's been admitted, the school called the ambulance because no one answered when they tried to reach you first. The accusation hit its mark because it was true. Sarah's hands clenched around her bag. You don't have the right to judge my parenting. You don't know what you have to do? Let me guess, run a company, manage a board, close deals? I'm sure it's all very important, but to Lily, the most important thing is whether someone will be there when she can't breathe. Sarah wanted to fire back, to explain about quarterly earnings and shareholder expectations and being a single mother trying to prove she could do it all. Instead, she said nothing, because Michael Cooper was right, and they both knew it. Can I see her now? He stepped aside. Please don't let her see you upset. Stress triggers attacks. The room felt different now. Lily was sitting up slightly, the oxygen mask replaced by a nasal cannula. Her color had improved, pink instead of the grayish blue that had terrified Sarah earlier. A half-empty juice box sat on the tray beside her. Hey, baby. Lily didn't meet her eyes. Mom, I'm sorry I made you leave work. The words were a knife between Sarah's ribs. She crossed the room and did something she hadn't done in months, sat on the edge of the hospital bed and took her daughter's hand. Listen to me. Nothing, and I mean nothing, is more important than you. I'm sorry I wasn't there when the ambulance came. Grandma Margaret says you have important meetings. Of course Margaret had said that. Of course her mother had spent the past 6 months teaching Lily the same lesson Margaret had taught Sarah. Work comes first. Always. Grandma Margaret is wrong. Lily's eyes widened. She'd never heard her mother contradict her grandmother before. Mr. Mike says I'm brave. Am I brave, Mom? The question broke something in Sarah's chest. You're the bravest person I know. For the first time in 2 years, Sarah Thornton cried in front of her daughter. Not the silent tears she sometimes shed alone in her office, but real crying, the kind that came from a place too deep to control. Lily, startled, wrapped thin arms around her mother's neck. Michael Cooper stood outside the room, visible through the glass partition, pretending not to notice. Evening visiting hours brought an unexpected visitor. Margaret Winters appeared at 7 p.m. in the same navy suit she'd worn to the board meeting, looking as if she'd simply extended her workday to include a hospital stop. She carried her Burberry handbag and an expression of mild disapproval. Sarah, still in the chair beside Lily's bed, looked up when her mother entered. Lily was asleep, finally, her breathing steady with the help of the oxygen cannula. I came to see my granddaughter. Margaret's voice was low, but it still carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. She crossed to the bed and looked down at Lily with something that might have been concern on a different person's face. On Margaret, it looked like assessment. She looks stable. She almost died. Margaret turned to face her daughter. Don't be dramatic. The hospital staff is excellent. She was never in real danger. 88% oxygen saturation, Mother. 2 points from brain damage. But she's fine now, which is why I need you to return to the office. The Gen Med contract needs your signature by 9 p.m. or we lose the deal. Sarah stood slowly, careful not to disturb Lily. Are you seriously asking me to leave my daughter in the hospital to sign a contract? I'm asking you to be a CEO. Lily has nurses, doctors, equipment. She doesn't need you to sit here all night. The company does need you. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped. Sarah looked at her mother, really looked at her, and saw what she'd been seeing her whole life. A woman who'd built an empire by sacrificing everything else on the altar of success. Number Margaret's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? I'm staying with Lily. Robert can sign the contract. I'll give him power of attorney for tonight. Sarah, you don't delegate something this important. My daughter is more important than any contract. Her mother's expression hardened into something familiar, the look that had preceded every difficult conversation of Sarah's childhood. Is this about your father again? Because David made his choices, and those choices nearly destroyed this company. I won't let you make the same mistakes. Dad died trying to prove himself to you. He worked himself to death because nothing was ever good enough. He died because he was weak. He let emotions cloud his judgment, just like you're doing right now. The accusation hung between them. Sarah felt 7 years old again, standing in her father's study while Margaret explained that Daddy wouldn't be coming home from the hospital because his heart had stopped. Margaret had delivered the news the way she delivered quarterly reports, factually, efficiently, without tears. If being like you means Lily grows up without a mother, then I'd rather be weak. Margaret picked up her bag. You'll regret this decision. Vanessa is already positioning herself to take over. The board is losing faith in your leadership. Let them. For the first time in her life, Sarah watched her mother leave without following. Michael Cooper's shift ended at 8 p.m., but he stopped by room 3 before heading out. Sarah was reading something on her iPad while Lily slept, and she looked up when he knocked on the doorframe. Just checking vitals before I clock out. How's she doing? Oxygen holding at 96%. No distress since the last treatment. He moved to the monitor, checking numbers with the efficiency of someone who'd done this thousands of times. His badge caught the light. Michael Cooper, RN, BSN, RRT. The letters after his name told a story Sarah was starting to piece together. Registered nurse, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, registered respiratory therapist. Not just a nurse, a specialist. I apologize for earlier. What I said about you being a nurse, it came out wrong. Michael glanced at her over his shoulder. You meant it came out honest? Most people think what you said. They just don't say it out loud. That doesn't make it right. He finished checking the monitor and turned to face her fully. For the first time, Sarah noticed the fatigue in his eyes, the kind that came from a double shift, not just a bad day. Do you know how many times I've been asked when the real doctor will arrive? How many patients have requested someone with more authority to make decisions about their care? Too many, I'm guessing, every single shift. But here's the thing, Miss Thornton. I don't need their validation. I know what I do matters. I know I save lives. What other people think about my job doesn't change that. The words struck something in Sarah, a chord she hadn't known was there. You're right. And I was wrong to judge. I don't know anything about your field, and I made assumptions based on what? Bias? Ignorance? Probably both. Most people do. An unexpected laugh escaped Sarah. You don't pull punches, do you? Life's too short to waste time pretending. Which brings me to something I wanted to discuss. He pulled up a stool and sat, deliberately maintaining professional distance, but settling in like someone planning to stay a while. Lily's asthma is severe, but it's manageable with the right protocols. The problem isn't the medications or the doctors. The problem is consistency. She needs someone who understands respiratory care, monitoring her daily, recognizing triggers before they become emergencies. She has a nanny, and Mrs. Patterson, our house manager. Do they know how to properly administer nebulizer treatments? Can they recognize the early signs of bronchospasm? Do they understand the difference between rescue medications and preventive therapy? Sarah opened her mouth and closed it again. The honest answer was that she didn't know what the nanny knew. She'd hired Rebecca based on references and a background check, not medical expertise. I see your point. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Look, I'm not trying to criticize your parenting. Single mother, demanding career, I get it. My ex-wife used to say I wasn't ambitious enough because I chose nursing over medical school. People make judgments based on limited information. The personal details surprised Sarah. You're divorced? 6 months. She wanted someone who wanted to be a doctor, who wanted a bigger house and a fancier car. I wanted to do work I believed in. We couldn't reconcile that. I'm sorry. Don't be. Better to know early than waste decades trying to be someone you're not. The wisdom in his voice suggested he'd thought about this often, had made peace with it. Sarah found herself curious about this man who'd saved her daughter and then challenged her in ways no one had dared in years. So what do you suggest? For Lily? Honestly? You need to learn how to manage her care yourself. Not delegate it. Actually understand it. Know what normal breathing sounds like versus labored. Know when to use the rescue inhaler versus when to call 911. Know how stress affects her symptoms. That's a lot to learn. I could teach you. The offer came simply, without fanfare or strings. Sarah studied his face, looking for ulterior motives, and finding none. Why would you do that? Because Lily deserves a mom who can help her when she's scared. And because, his voice softened, I heard what you said to your mother in the hallway, about refusing to be the mother she was. That takes guts. You were eavesdropping? The walls are glass, sound carries. And for what it's worth, you made the right choice. Sarah's phone buzzed, probably Margaret, possibly Robert, definitely someone wanting her to be somewhere else doing something important. She silenced it without looking. If you're serious about teaching me, I'm serious about learning. What would that look like? Michael stood, pulling a card from his scrub pocket. That's my number. Call me tomorrow. We'll set up some training sessions. Your house, probably, since Lily will be more comfortable there. No charge. This isn't about money. Then what is it about? He looked at Lily, still sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. It's about making sure she doesn't end up back here in 6 weeks because no one at home knew how to spot the warning signs. After he left, Sarah sat in the quiet room and thought about the last time someone had offered to help her without expecting something in return. She couldn't remember when that had been. The next morning brought discharge papers, instructions for follow-up care, and Lily's excitement about going home. Sarah had spent the night in the hospital chair, waking every hour when the nurses came to check vitals. She felt like she'd been hit by a truck, and her $1,500 suit looked like she'd slept in it, which she had. Mrs. Patterson met them at the mansion's front door, her weathered face creased with disapproval. Mrs. Thornton, your mother called 6 times. She wants you to return her calls immediately. I'll call her later. Right now, I need to get Lily settled. The house felt different returning from the hospital. Too big, too cold, too much empty space. Lily went straight to her room, a princess-themed sanctuary that Sarah had spent $40,000 decorating with an interior designer. Her daughter looked small in the king-sized bed, surrounded by pillows she'd never asked for. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Tired? Mr. Mike said I need to rest for a few days. No school. That's right. And Mom's going to stay home with you. Lily's eyes widened. Really? But what about work? Work can wait. The words felt strange in Sarah's mouth, foreign, like speaking a language she'd never learned. But they also felt right in a way that quarterly reports and board meetings never had. Later that afternoon, with Lily napping and Mrs. Patterson grudgingly preparing soup, Sarah stood in front of the nebulizer machine in her daughter's bathroom. The device looked simple enough: a small compressor, a medicine cup, a mask. But the instruction manual might as well have been written in Sanskrit. She pulled out Michael's card and dialed before she could second-guess herself. Cooper. His voice was different on the phone, more guarded, like he'd been expecting a hospital administrator calling about overtime. Michael, it's Sarah Thornton. You said to call about learning to help Lily? A pause, then his voice warmed. Yeah, I did. You serious about this? I'm standing in front of a nebulizer machine right now, and I have no idea how to assemble it. So, yes, I'm serious. She heard him laugh, a real laugh that made her smile despite herself. Okay, I can come by tonight after my shift, around 7 p.m., if that works for you. That works. And Michael? Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might hate me by the end of this. I'm a tough teacher. I'm a fast learner. We'll see. He arrived at precisely 7 o'clock, driving a Honda Civic that looked at least 10 years old. Sarah watched from the window as he parked next to her Mercedes, the contrast between the vehicles somehow representative of everything that separated them. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, Carhartt probably, sturdy and practical, and carried a backpack that looked military surplus. Mrs. Patterson answered the door with the expression she reserved for delivery men and door-to-door salespeople. Can I help you? I'm Michael Cooper. Ms. Thornton is expecting me. The house manager's eyebrows rose fractionally before she stepped aside. Wait here. Sarah came down the curved staircase feeling oddly nervous. She'd changed out of her work clothes into jeans and a cashmere sweater, but somehow Michael in his flannel shirt looked more comfortable than she felt in her own house. You came. Said I would. How's Lily? Sleeping. She's been tired all day. Good. Sleep's the best medicine for recovery. You ready for Nebulizer 101? They spent the next 2 hours in Lily's bathroom while Michael taught Sarah the basics of respiratory care. He showed her how to measure the correct dose of albuterol, how to connect the tubing, how to clean the equipment between uses. His hands were patient and sure, demonstrating each step multiple times without irritation when she asked him to repeat something. The key is consistency. Same time every morning and evening, whether she seems to need it or not. Prevention beats treatment every time. Sarah took notes on her iPad, typing frantically to capture every detail. Michael watched her with something between amusement and approval. You really do learn fast. I didn't become CEO by being slow. Fair point, but this isn't business. This is your daughter's health. Sometimes the two require different approaches. What do you mean? In business, you can delegate, compartmentalize, outsource. With Lily's care, you need to own it. All of it. The boring parts, the scary parts, the 3 a.m. parts when she wakes up wheezing and needs someone who knows what to do. The weight of that responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders. She'd managed billion-dollar acquisitions with less anxiety than she felt contemplating a midnight asthma attack. What if I mess up? What if I give her the wrong dose, or don't recognize the signs, or... Then you learn and do better next time. Lily doesn't need perfect. She needs present. By 9 o'clock, Sarah could assemble and operate the nebulizer with reasonable confidence. Michael packed up his demonstration equipment and shouldered his backpack. "You did good tonight. Really good." The praise felt disproportionately meaningful. "Stay for dinner?" "I was going to order something." "You cook?" The question was innocent, but something in his tone suggested he was testing her. Sarah lifted her chin slightly. "I can cook. I'm not great at it, but I try." His grin was unexpected and transformative, changing his entire face from serious to boyish. "All right, I'll stay, but only if you let me help. I don't trust beginners alone in kitchens." They ended up making pasta together in Sarah's massive gourmet kitchen, a space that cost $300,000 to renovate and that Sarah had used maybe 10 times in 2 years. Michael moved through it with easy confidence, finding ingredients she didn't know she had, suggesting modifications when the recipe called for things she was missing. "Where'd you learn to cook?" "My mom has Parkinson's. She needs a specific diet. Low sodium, high protein, easy to swallow. I learned because restaurants don't know how to do it right." "You take care of your mother?" "She took care of me for 38 years. Seemed fair to return the favor." Sarah stirred the sauce, watching Michael chop vegetables with practiced efficiency. Most of the men she knew, executives, board members, the few she'd dated since her divorce, would have considered caring for an aging parent something you hired help for, not something you did yourself. "My father died 6 years ago. Heart attack at 59. He was at his desk, working on a presentation for an investors meeting." "I'm sorry." "My mother told me at his funeral that weakness killed him. She meant emotional weakness, caring too much about doing the right thing instead of the profitable thing." "That's harsh." Michael's knife stilled. "That's cruel." The simple correction landed hard. Sarah had spent years justifying Margaret's behavior, making excuses, telling herself that her mother's coldness came from strength. Hearing someone call it what it was, cruelty, felt like permission to acknowledge what she'd always known. "She raised me the same way. Love was weakness. Emotions were liability. Success was everything." And now? Now I'm 36 years old, and my daughter trusts a stranger more than she trusts me. So maybe my mother was wrong. They ate at the kitchen island instead of the formal dining room that sat 14 people and felt like a museum. The pasta was slightly overcooked, and the sauce needed salt, but Sarah couldn't remember enjoying a meal more. "Can I ask you something? Why'd you divorce?" Michael set down his fork. "Honestly? Because my ex-wife wanted me to be someone I'm not. She wanted a doctor, someone with prestige, someone who could give her a certain kind of life. I wanted to be a nurse, do work that mattered, come home at night knowing I'd helped people. We couldn't reconcile those visions." "Do you regret it?" "The divorce? No. Marrying her in the first place? Sometimes. But regret doesn't change anything, so mostly I try not to think about it." Sarah appreciated his honesty, the way he spoke about difficult things without dramatizing them. "What about you? Your marriage?" She traced the rim of her water glass. "My ex-husband is a good man. He's a great father to Lily, but he wanted a wife who came home at night, who remembered school events, who prioritized family over board meetings. I wanted to prove I could run a company better than any man. We wanted different things from different people." "You miss him?" "I miss who I thought I was going to be when I married him. Does that make sense?" Michael nodded slowly. "Yeah, it does." At 10:30, he stood to leave. Lily's first nebulizer treatment in the morning should be around 7 a.m. "Want me to come by tomorrow?" Make sure you've got it down? You don't have to. I want to. Besides, I have 3 days off starting tomorrow. Might as well use them productively. 3 days off? And he was offering to spend them teaching her how to care for her daughter. Sarah walked him to the door, acutely aware that in the span of 24 hours, this man had become something she couldn't quite define. Not quite friend, more than acquaintance, someone whose opinion mattered in ways she didn't fully understand. Michael, why are you really doing this? Helping me? He paused on the threshold, the night air cool behind him. Because I heard what you said to your mother, about refusing to be the mother she was. That takes courage. And because Lily deserves a parent who fights for her instead of just fighting. After he left, Sarah climbed the stairs to Lily's room. Her daughter slept curled on her side, breathing easily, one hand clutching the stuffed bear that Thomas had given her for her 5th birthday. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and did something she hadn't done since Lily was an infant. She stayed, just watching her daughter breathe. Tomorrow she would call Robert and delegate the week's meetings. She would ignore Margaret's demands that she return to the office. She would learn how to assemble a nebulizer in the dark, how to read Lily's breathing patterns, how to be the mother her daughter needed instead of the CEO her company expected. Tonight, for the first time in years, she was exactly where she belonged. Michael arrived at 6:45 the next morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee from a diner Sarah had never heard of. She met him at the door, already dressed in yoga pants and a Harvard sweatshirt, clothing she owned but rarely wore, relics from a version of herself that had disappeared somewhere between business school and the CEO suite. Thought you might need this. The coffee was dark and strong, served in a paper cup that cost maybe $2 compared to the $8 lattes she usually ordered from the artisan place downtown. It tasted better than anything she'd had in months. Lily's still sleeping. Treatment at 7? Let her sleep until 7:15. Rest matters more than sticking to an exact schedule. The goal is consistency over rigidity. They sat in the kitchen while dawn broke over the grounds, painting the manicured lawn in shades of gold and amber. Michael drank his coffee black and watched the sunrise with the appreciation of someone who didn't often get to see mornings from this angle. You work nights? Rotating shifts. 2 weeks days, 2 weeks evenings, 1 week overnights. The hospital says it builds flexibility. Really, it just destroys your sleep schedule. That sounds awful. It's nursing. You learn to function on 4 hours and hospital cafeteria coffee. Sarah studied him over the rim of her cup. He had laugh lines around his eyes and calluses on his palms, evidence of a life spent doing rather than delegating. When was the last time she'd actually done something with her hands beyond typing emails and signing documents? At 7:20, they went upstairs together. Lily was awake, sitting in bed with a book about horses that she'd read at least a dozen times. Her face lit up when she saw Michael.
Mr. Mike, you came back.
Promised your mom I'd teach her how to be a nebulizer expert. You up for helping? The treatment took 15 minutes. Michael coached Sarah through each step while Lily sat patiently with the mask over her face, breathing in the medicated mist. When it was done, he had Lily demonstrate proper inhaler technique, something Sarah was shocked to learn her 7-year-old knew better than she did. See how she holds her breath after inhaling? That's crucial. Most people don't wait long enough for the medication to settle in the lungs.
How long?
10 seconds minimum. Count it out. Lily, show your mom. The little girl took a practice puff from her empty inhaler, held her breath while counting on her fingers, then exhaled slowly. Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with shame. Her daughter had learned life-saving skills from hospital staff and YouTube videos, while Sarah had been in board meetings discussing profit margins. After breakfast, which Michael cooked while Sarah watched and took mental notes, he suggested they spend the morning going through Lily's medical supplies. The medicine cabinet in her bathroom turned out to be a disaster of expired prescriptions, duplicate inhalers, and medications Sarah couldn't identify. This one's been recalled. This one expired 8 months ago. This one, he held up an unmarked bottle. What is this? I have no idea. The nanny might know. The nanny isn't here. You are. If Lily has a reaction to something, you need to know what's in your house. They spent 2 hours organizing, labeling, and disposing of outdated supplies. Michael created a spreadsheet on Sarah's iPad listing every medication, its purpose, dosage, and refill schedule. The level of detail was extraordinary, the kind of systematic approach Sarah used for managing pharmaceutical trials, now applied to her daughter's daily care. You're good at this. Teaching, I mean. I've trained a lot of new nurses. You learn to break things down into manageable steps. The key is not overwhelming people with too much information at once. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, her expression suggesting she'd witnessed something unsavory. Mrs. Thornton, your mother is on the phone. She says it's urgent. Sarah's jaw tightened. Tell her I'll call her back. She's called 4 times this morning. Then she can wait for a 5th. The house manager withdrew with visible disapproval. Michael gathered the expired medications into a disposal bag, carefully not commenting on the family dynamics he'd just witnessed. Your mom doesn't approve of you taking time off. My mom doesn't approve of anything that doesn't directly increase shareholder value. She thinks emotions are a character flaw. What do you think? Sarah watched Lily through the bathroom door, her daughter now playing with dolls in her bedroom, breathing easily, safe. I think I've spent 36 years trying to prove I'm not weak by never letting myself feel anything. And I think I'm tired of living that way. The words hung in the air between them, more honest than Sarah had been with anyone in years. Michael met her eyes with an expression that held no judgment, only understanding. For what it's worth, choosing to be here instead of at the office, that's not weakness. That's strength. By afternoon, Sarah's phone had 17 missed calls from Margaret and 6 from Robert. She ignored all of them and spent the time learning to recognize the subtle signs of respiratory distress, the flaring of Lily's nostrils, the hollowing beneath her collarbones, the slight wheeze that preceded a full attack. Michael was patient and thorough, correcting her observations without criticism, building her confidence through repetition. At 4 o'clock, Vanessa Chen's name appeared on the caller ID. Sarah almost rejected it, but something made her answer. Vanessa. Sarah, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all day. We have a situation. The COO's voice carried an edge of excitement poorly disguised as concern. Sarah's instincts, honed by years of corporate politics, immediately went on alert. What kind of situation? GenMed is threatening to pull out of the partnership. They say our delay in signing yesterday's contract signals instability in leadership. Margaret wants to call an emergency board meeting. Of course she does. Tell the board I'll address their concerns Monday morning. Sarah, they want to meet tonight, 6 p.m. Margaret's already at headquarters preparing a presentation on interim leadership structures. The implication was clear. Margaret was making her move, using Sarah's absence to position herself or someone else as a more reliable alternative. Probably Vanessa herself, groomed and ready to step into the role Margaret had originally wanted for someone less sentimental than her own daughter. I'm not coming to the office tonight, Vanessa. My daughter was in the hospital 2 days ago. She's home now, though, right? You have staff who can watch her. Sarah looked across the room at Michael, who was teaching Lily how to peak flow meter to measure lung function. Her daughter was laughing, actually laughing, as she blew into the device and watched the needle jump. I have more than staff. I have someone who actually cares whether she lives or dies. Tell Margaret I'll see her Monday. She ended the call before Vanessa could respond. Michael glanced up, reading the tension in her shoulders. Trouble? My mother's staging a coup. Nothing new. You want to talk about it? She surprised herself by actually considering it. In her world, showing vulnerability was suicide. Every sign of weakness became ammunition for rivals. But Michael wasn't part of that world. He had no stake in Thornton Biomed's power structures. My mom built that company with my father. When he died, she became sole CEO and ran it like a military operation. Efficient, ruthless, profitable. When she retired last year, the board appointed me as successor. She's never forgiven them for choosing blood over merit. She doesn't think you earned it? She knows I earned it. That's what makes her angry. I'm competent enough to succeed, but soft enough to do it differently than she would. In her mind, that makes me dangerous. Dangerous to what? To the company, to her legacy, to everything she sacrificed to build. Michael set down the peak flow meter and gave her his full attention. Let me ask you something. If you could remake that company from scratch, with no pressure from your mom or the board or shareholders, what would you do differently? The question caught Sarah off guard. No one had ever asked her that. Her entire tenure as CEO had been defending decisions, justifying strategies, proving she could maintain what Margaret had built. The idea of actually changing things had seemed impossible. I'd slow down the drug approval process, do more thorough safety testing, even if it meant missing market windows. I'd invest in treatments for rare diseases that aren't profitable. You'd run it like your father wanted to. How did you know that? Because you said he died doing the right thing instead of the profitable thing. Sounds like you inherited his compass, not your mother's. Sarah felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of tension she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. Maybe that's why she's so determined to push me out. She sees him in me, and it terrifies her. The rest of the afternoon passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. Treatments, exercises, a simple dinner that Sarah managed to cook without burning anything. Michael stayed late, long past when his teaching duties required, helping Lily with homework and showing Sarah how to check her daughter's breathing while she slept. At 9 o'clock, with Lily in bed, they stood at the front door again. Michael's Civic looked small and ordinary in the circular driveway, dwarfed by the mansion and the Mercedes and the sheer wealth that surrounded it. Same time tomorrow? Actually, I have to work tomorrow, 12-hour shift at the hospital. But I'm off again Thursday and Friday if you need anything. We'll manage. You've taught me enough to survive a day. He smiled, but there was something uncertain in it. Sarah, I should probably mention, I got offered a position today. Private duty nursing for a family in Brookline. Twins with cystic fibrosis. The pay is significantly better than hospital work.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. The words came automatically, but Sarah felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Of course, someone with Michael's skills would move into private care. It paid better, offered regular hours, eliminated the chaos of emergency room nursing.
The thing is, they want me to start in 2 weeks, which means I wouldn't be available to help with Lily's care.
Oh, of course. That makes sense, unless... He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully.
The family in Brookline has full-time care already. They want me for oversight and crisis management, maybe 20 hours a week. I'd still have time for other work.
Sarah's heart rate picked up. Are you suggesting...
I'm suggesting that Lily needs consistent respiratory care. You need someone who can teach you to manage her condition long-term. I could do both. Work with the Brookline family and consult here. If you're interested. How much would you charge? Michael named a figure that was less than Sarah spent on monthly car payments. She almost laughed at the absurdity of someone with his expertise asking for so little. Double it, and we have a deal. Plus benefits and a healthcare package. Sarah, that's too much. You're a specialist with 15 years of experience who saved my daughter's life. It's not nearly enough. I'll have my attorney drop a contract. He looked uncomfortable with the money talk, the way people did when they weren't accustomed to negotiating their own value. I don't need a fancy contract. A handshake works fine. I'm the CEO of a pharmaceutical company. I don't do business on handshakes. You'll get a proper employment agreement with paid time off, retirement benefits, and a severance clause. Take it or leave it. The corner of his mouth quirked. You're kind of terrifying when you go into executive mode. Good. Someone needs to make sure you're properly compensated.
Do we have a deal?
Yeah, we have a deal. They shook on it anyway, his hand rough and warm against hers. Sarah found herself reluctant to let go. Thursday morning brought the first real test. Sarah woke at 6 a.m. to the sound of Lily coughing, not the productive cough that cleared mucus, but the dry, barking cough that signaled airway inflammation. She was in her daughter's room in seconds, finding Lily sitting up in bed with her shoulders hunched, working to breathe. Don't panic. This is what Michael taught you. Sarah grabbed the rescue inhaler from the nightstand and helped Lily take 2 puffs, counting out the 10-second holds between breaths. The coughing subsided slightly, but the wheezing continued, a high-pitched whistle on each exhale that made Sarah's chest tight with fear. She checked the clock. 6:15. Michael was working until 7. She could call him, but this was exactly the kind of situation he'd trained her to handle independently. Nebulizer. Right. She assembled the device from memory, measured the albuterol dose, added the saline, connected the tubing. Her hands shook slightly, but the muscle memory held. 5 minutes later, Lily was breathing easier, the wheeze fading as the medication opened her airways. Good job, baby. You're doing great. Lily looked up at her with trust that Sarah hadn't earned but desperately wanted to keep. You're getting good at this, Mom. The words felt like absolution. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway at 6:30 with her usual disapproving expression. Mrs. Thornton, I heard the nebulizer. Is Miss Lily having an episode? We handled it. She's stable now. Perhaps we should call the doctor. I am perfectly capable of managing my daughter's asthma, Mrs. Patterson. But thank you for your concern. The house manager retreated, her stiff posture broadcasting opinions she'd never voiced directly. Sarah didn't care. For the first time since Lily's diagnosis 3 years ago, she'd responded to a crisis without panicking, without calling 911, without proving her mother right about her weakness. At 7:30, she sent Michael a text. Morning attack. Used rescue inhaler plus nebulizer. She's stable. I think I'm getting the hang of this. His response came immediately. Proud of you. That's exactly what you should have done. Call if anything changes. The day unfolded with an unfamiliar rhythm. Sarah worked from home, laptop open at the kitchen table where she could see Lily playing in the adjoining family room. She joined conference calls with one ear listening to her daughter's breathing patterns. She reviewed financial reports between nebulizer treatments. She rescheduled the board meeting Margaret had demanded, not to Monday, but to the following Friday, on her terms. Margaret called at 2 p.m. Sarah let it go to voicemail. The message, when she listened to it later, was predictably acidic. Sarah, your behavior this week is completely unacceptable. You've missed 3 critical meetings, ignored urgent communications from the board, and delegated decisions that require your direct attention. I raised you to be stronger than this. Call me immediately. Sarah deleted the message and went to check on Lily's peak flow numbers. Friday brought Michael back, this time with a surprise. He knocked at 8 a.m. carrying a backpack and a small terrarium containing what appeared to be a frog. Lily's going to love this. What is it? African dwarf frog. Low maintenance, lives in water, fun to watch. I figured she needs something that's alive and depends on her, but isn't as high stakes as a dog. You brought my daughter a frog? I brought your daughter a responsibility. Caring for something else teaches empathy and routine. Plus, frogs are cool. Lily's reaction exceeded even Michael's expectations. She named the frog Douglas and spent the next hour learning about proper feeding schedules, water temperature, and tank maintenance. Sarah watched her daughter, who struggled to breathe most days, who'd been hospitalized 4 times in 6 months, who carried an inhaler everywhere like other kids carried candy, take ownership of another creature's well-being with fierce dedication. This is who she could be, given the chance. Not just a patient, but a person. While Lily was absorbed with Douglas, Michael pulled Sarah aside. I wanted to talk to you about something. The board meeting Margaret called. How do you know about that? Your house manager mentioned it yesterday. She seems to think I'm corrupting you with my working-class influence. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Mrs. Patterson has very strong opinions about appropriate social hierarchies. Please continue. I'm not trying to interfere in your business, but I've been thinking about what you said. About how your mom wants to push you out for being too soft on safety protocols. She thinks I'm costing the company money by insisting on thorough testing. Are you? Probably. But I'm also preventing lawsuits and saving lives. The question is whether the board values short-term profits or long-term reputation. Have you asked them? The question was so simple it was almost insulting. Of course she'd asked them. She'd presented data, made projections, outlined risk management strategies. What she hadn't done, what Margaret would never have done, was appeal to their humanity. I've shown them numbers. That's what they understand. Maybe you're showing them the wrong thing. These people have kids, grandkids. They use your medications. Make it personal. Sarah stared at him. You're suggesting I manipulate board members by exploiting their emotional attachment to their families? I'm suggesting you remind them that the children who take your drugs are real people, not statistics. That's not manipulation. That's truth. The idea was so foreign to everything Margaret had taught her that Sarah's immediate instinct was to reject it. CEOs led with facts and logic, not feelings and sentiment. Except that Michael was right. The AR-47 trials involved real children, kids like Lily, families making desperate choices because they trusted Thornton Biomed to do right by them. I'll think about it. Friday afternoon, Sarah's attorney messaged with the employment contract for Michael. She reviewed it carefully, making sure every benefit she'd promised was included. 40 hours per week consulting on Lily's care with flexibility for the Brookline position. Health insurance, retirement matching, 4 weeks paid vacation, and a salary that reflected his actual value rather than what hospital administrators decided nurses deserved. She printed 2 copies and brought them downstairs where Michael was teaching Lily to check Douglas's water pH levels. I need you to review this before you sign. He took the contract warily, the way someone might handle a snake that could be harmless or venomous. His eyes widened as he read through the terms. Sarah, this is more than we discussed. It's what you're worth. I'm a nurse who's going to help with 1 patient. This is executive-level compensation. You're a specialist who's going to ensure my daughter doesn't die from a preventable asthma attack. If you think that's worth less than what I pay my marketing director, we have very different value systems. Michael set the contract on the counter, running a hand through his hair. I need to be honest with you about something. The Brookline position fell through. The family decided to go with someone who specializes in cystic fibrosis specifically. Sarah's heart jumped before she could stop it. So you're available full-time? If you still want me. The question carried weight beyond its simple words. They both knew this arrangement was unusual, a wealthy CEO hiring a male nurse to live in and care for her daughter. People would talk. Mrs. Patterson already disapproved. Margaret would use it as ammunition. I want you. The words came out more intensely than Sarah intended. She felt heat rise to her face and quickly clarified. I mean, Lily needs consistent care, and you're clearly the best person for the job. Michael's expression suggested he'd heard what she meant as much as what she said. Then I accept. When do you want me to start? There's a guest house on the property. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, separate entrance. It's been empty since my father died. He used it as a studio. You could move in whenever you're ready. Sarah, I can't just move into your guest house. It's practical. Lily has breathing episodes at night. Having you on site means faster response times and better outcomes. Plus, you'd have your own space, privacy. You wouldn't be underfoot. She was babbling now, nervous in a way she hadn't been since her first board presentation. Michael watched her with an expression that was part amusement, part something else she couldn't identify. Okay. I'll move in this weekend, but Sarah... Yes? We need to establish boundaries. I'm here as Lily's caregiver. That's the relationship. I don't want either of us to get confused about what this is. The clarification stung more than it should have. Of course he was right. Of course they needed professional boundaries. She was his employer. He was her employee. The fact that she'd started looking forward to his arrival each morning, that she'd caught herself checking her appearance before he came over, that she felt more comfortable with him than anyone she'd known in years. None of that mattered. Absolutely. Strictly professional. Good. Then we're on the same page. Except they weren't, and Sarah suspected Michael knew it as well as she did. Saturday morning brought moving trucks, or rather one truck, because Michael didn't own much. Sarah watched from the house as he directed the movers, a handful of furniture and boxes that fit easily into the guest house's modest rooms. She'd had the place cleaned and stocked with basics: fresh linens, a full refrigerator, coffee maker, the kinds of things someone living alone might need. When the truck left, she walked across the garden to the guest house with the excuse of checking if he needed anything. Michael met her at the door in jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days, hair damp from a shower. Hey. Sorry, still getting settled. No rush. I just wanted to make sure you have everything. She stepped inside and immediately felt like she'd crossed a line. This was his space now, his home, and she was intruding. But Michael gestured her in, seemingly unaware of the intimacy of the moment. The guest house was simple but well designed. Open floor plan with kitchen flowing into living area, 2 bedrooms off a central hallway, bathroom with a vintage clawfoot tub that had probably cost more than Michael's car. He'd already made it his own in small ways. Medical textbooks stacked on the coffee table, a photograph of an elderly woman on the mantel, a Red Sox cap hanging by the door. Your mom? Linda Cooper. She's at a care facility now. The Parkinson's got too advanced for me to manage alone. I visit her every Sunday. Sarah studied the photograph. The woman had Michael's eyes and his smile, warm and genuine. She looks kind. She is. Raised me alone after my dad died. Worked 2 jobs to keep me in school. Never complained once. The contrast to Margaret was stark. Sarah tried to imagine her mother working 2 jobs, sacrificing personal comfort for her child's benefit, putting anyone's needs ahead of her own ambitions. The image wouldn't form. You're lucky. Michael followed her gaze to the photograph. Yeah, I am. That night, Sarah lay in her bed in the main house while Michael slept 100 yards away in the guest house, and she thought about luck. She'd been born into wealth, given every advantage, inherited a company worth billions. Michael had grown up working class, put himself through nursing school, and found meaning in work that most people considered beneath them. By any objective measure, she was the lucky one. So why did it feel like he had something she'd never possessed? Sunday morning, Lily woke with a fever. Nothing severe, just a low-grade 99.8, but enough to trigger Sarah's newly developed maternal anxiety. She was reaching for her phone to call Michael when he knocked on the kitchen door, already dressed and carrying his medical bag. Mrs. Patterson called me, said Lily was warm. I was just about to text you. I'm on call 24/7, remember? That's what you're paying me for. He examined Lily with practiced efficiency, checking her throat, listening to her lungs, taking her temperature with an ear thermometer that gave readings faster than the oral one Sarah had been using. Low fever, slight inflammation in the throat, probably a cold virus. The question is whether it'll trigger an asthma exacerbation. What do we do? Monitor closely. Increase nebulizer treatments to every 4 hours. Push fluids. Watch for increased coughing or wheezing. If her fever goes above 101, we call her pediatrician. Should I keep her home from school tomorrow? Definitely. Viral infections are the #1 trigger for asthma attacks in kids her age. Sarah nodded, mentally rearranging her Monday schedule. She had the board meeting with Margaret at 10 a.m., the one she'd rescheduled on her terms, the one that would likely determine whether she kept her position as CEO. But Lily needed her more than Thornton Biomed did. I'll cancel my meetings. Michael looked up from where he was preparing a nebulizer treatment. Sarah, you can reschedule, but you can't avoid that board meeting forever. Your mom isn't going to stop pushing. I know. So what's your plan? She thought about what he'd said earlier, about making it personal, about reminding the board that statistics were people. She thought about Lily, about all the children who'd take AR-47 if Thornton Biomed rushed it to market without adequate safety testing. I'm going to tell them the truth, which is that some things matter more than quarterly earnings, and if they can't accept that, they should find a new CEO. Michael smiled, the expression transforming his face the way it always did. There she is, the woman who told her mother off in a hospital hallway. You heard that? Everyone heard that. Glass walls, remember? By Monday morning, Lily's fever had dropped to 98.6, but the cough had worsened. A wet, productive cough that meant mucus in her lungs. Sarah wanted to stay home. Michael insisted she go to the meeting. I've got this. You've taught me everything I need to know. And Lily needs to see her mom fighting for what's right. The Thornton Biomed headquarters felt foreign after a week away. Sarah rode the elevator to the 15th floor in her Brooks Brothers suit and Stuart Weitzman heels, armor donned for battle. The conference room was already full when she arrived. Board members, executives, and Margaret sitting at the head of the table like she'd never relinquished the position. Sarah, how kind of you to join us. Her mother's voice dripped sarcasm. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Robert Price wouldn't meet Sarah's eyes. Only Dr. Patel, the chief scientific officer, offered an encouraging nod. Let's begin. Sarah took her seat at the opposite end of the table, forcing Margaret to acknowledge the actual power structure. She opened her laptop and pulled up the presentation she'd prepared last night while Lily slept, and Michael watched TV in the guest house. I know many of you have concerns about AR-47's delayed timeline. I'm here to address those concerns and explain why I stand by the decision to extend safety testing. The next 20 minutes were the most important of Sarah's career. She walked them through the data, the 8% adverse reaction rate, the potential for severe complications, the lawsuits they'd face if they released a medication that harmed children. She showed them case studies from other pharmaceutical companies that had rushed products to market and paid the price in damaged reputations and billion-dollar settlements. But the statistics weren't what changed the room. The shift happened when Sarah closed her laptop and spoke without notes. My daughter was hospitalized last week with an asthma attack. Oxygen saturation, 88%. She couldn't breathe, and I wasn't there.
I was here, in this room, defending quarterly projections to people who've never watched a child turn blue from lack of air. She looked directly at Margaret. My mother taught me that emotions are weakness, that profit matters more than people, that a good CEO makes hard choices without sentiment. The room was silent. Even Margaret had stopped pretending to check her phone. I'm here to tell you that she was wrong. The hard choice isn't sacrificing safety for profit. The hard choice is accepting lower returns because it's the right thing to do. AR-47 will be an incredible medication when it's ready. When we can guarantee that every child who takes it will be helped, not harmed. She stood, gathering her materials. If that makes me too soft to be CEO, I'll resign. But I won't compromise on this. Not for shareholders, not for market position, and not for the legacy of Thornton Biomed. Some things are more important than quarterly earnings. The silence stretched for 5 seconds that felt like hours. Then Dr. Patel started clapping. Slowly at first, then with conviction. Robert Price joined her, then others, until everyone except Margaret and Vanessa was applauding. Motion to vote. Do we support CEO Thornton's timeline for AR-47 safety testing? The vote was 8-2 in favor. Margaret and Vanessa were the only dissenters. Sarah left the building and drove straight home, shaking with adrenaline. She found Michael in Lily's room, reading to her from a book about marine biology, while the nebulizer ran its cycle. How'd it go? I won, 8-2. Michael set down the book and smiled at her with something that looked like pride. Told you. Truth beats manipulation every time. That night, after Lily was asleep and Michael had retreated to the guest house, Sarah stood at her bedroom window, watching the lights in his living room. They'd established boundaries. She'd hired him for Lily's care. Their relationship was professional, but somewhere between nebulizer treatments and midnight frog feeding lessons and speeches about truth over profit, those boundaries had started to blur. She wanted to walk across the garden, knock on his door, tell him that she'd never felt more like herself than in the moments when he challenged her to be better. She didn't. Instead, she went to bed alone and dreamed about a man who believed that caring for others was strength, not weakness. Tuesday brought complications. Lily's cough worsened despite treatments, her breathing more labored with each passing hour. By afternoon, Michael was checking her oxygen saturation every 30 minutes, his expression growing more concerned with each reading. We need to call her pulmonologist. Is it that serious? She's not getting worse, but she's not improving either. This could be developing into bronchitis or pneumonia. I'd rather be overly cautious. Dr. Rodriguez saw them at 4 p.m. After listening to Lily's lungs and reviewing her recent history, she prescribed antibiotics and a course of oral steroids. Keep up the nebulizer treatments every 4 hours. If she spikes a fever above 101 or her oxygen drops below 92%, take her to the ER. Sarah felt the familiar panic rising, but Michael was there, steady presence at her shoulder. We've got this. You know what to watch for now. That night became a vigil. Sarah set alarms every 4 hours for treatments. Michael checked on them between his own sleep cycles, appearing like a guardian angel whenever Sarah started to doubt herself. By 3 a.m., exhausted and worried, Sarah finally broke. I can't do this. What if I miss something? What if she gets worse and I don't notice? Michael had been preparing the 3 a.m. nebulizer treatment. He set down the medication cup and turned to face her fully. You can do this. I've watched you learn more about respiratory care in 1 week than most parents learn in years. You recognize symptoms faster than half the nurses I work with. And you know what Lily needs more than perfect technique? What? She needs you to believe in yourself as much as I believe in you. The words hit like a physical touch. Sarah looked at him across the darkened room, this man who'd entered their lives by chance and stayed by choice, who taught her that strength came in forms she'd never recognized. Why? Why do you believe in me? Because you're here. At 3 a.m., exhausted, scared, but here. That's not weakness, Sarah. That's love. The moment stretched between them, charged with everything they weren't saying. Then Lily coughed, the spell broke, and they returned to their roles, nurse and mother, employee and employer, two people pretending that boundaries still existed. By Wednesday morning, the antibiotics had kicked in. Lily's breathing eased, her color improved, her energy returned. Sarah canceled another day of meetings and spent it on the living room floor building Lego structures, while Michael supervised medication schedules and called in prescription refills. Mrs. Patterson watched from doorways with increasing disapproval. At noon, she finally approached Sarah while Michael was in the guest house on a phone call. "Mrs. Thornton, if I may speak plainly," "You always do, Mrs. Patterson. This arrangement with Mr. Cooper is highly irregular. A single woman, a male employee living on the property. The staff is beginning to talk. Let them talk. Your mother called. She's concerned about appearances. My mother is concerned about control. There's a difference." The house manager's lips thinned. "I've worked for this family for 20 years. I've never seen you behave this way." Sarah looked at her daughter, healthy and happy for the first time in months. Then at the guest house, where a man who valued people over profit was probably reviewing medical journals to ensure Lily got the best possible care. "Then you've never seen me be a good mother." "Excuse me, Mrs. Patterson. I have a Lego castle to finish." Thursday brought unexpected visitors. Sarah was in the kitchen making lunch, actually cooking, not ordering from restaurants, when the doorbell rang. Mrs. Patterson answered it with her usual efficiency, then appeared in the kitchen doorway looking deeply uncomfortable. "Mrs. Thornton, there are reporters at the door, from the Boston Globe. They're asking questions about recent board decisions and your relationship with your mother." Sarah's stomach dropped. Margaret had gone to the press. Of course she had. It was exactly the kind of power play her mother excelled at. "Tell them no comment and close the door. They already have photographs." "Of Mr. Cooper." "They're asking if you've been distracted from company responsibilities by personal entanglements." The implication was clear. Margaret had leaked not just information about the board conflict, but suggestive details about Michael's presence in Sarah's life. The story would write itself. CEO neglects duties for inappropriate relationship with staff, puts company at risk, proves herself unfit for leadership. Michael appeared from the guest house, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on?" Sarah met his eyes and saw her own understanding reflected there. They'd been careful, professional, appropriate. None of it would matter. Margaret was weaponizing the appearance of impropriety to undermine Sarah's position. "My mother is trying to destroy me, and she's using you to do it." Michael stepped past Mrs. Patterson and positioned himself between Sarah and the front door like a shield. "I'll handle the reporters." "No, this is my mess, my mother's attack. I should—" "Sarah, you're emotionally compromised right now. Let me deal with them professionally." He walked to the door before she could argue. Through the window, Sarah watched him speak to the 3 reporters gathered on her front steps, his body language calm and authoritative. Whatever he said made them lower their cameras and step back. After 2 minutes, they returned to their cars and drove away. "What did you tell them?" "That this is private property. You have no comment, and any published photographs taken without consent will result in legal action. Also that I'm a licensed medical professional employed to manage a minor child's chronic illness, which makes their insinuations not just false,
but potentially libelous. Sarah felt something unknot in her chest.
You didn't have to do that.
Yeah, I did. Your mother wants to make me a weapon against you. I won't be used that way. The statement carried weight beyond its simple words.
Michael had just declared his loyalty in a way that made professional boundaries seem absurdly inadequate. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, her small face pinched with worry.
Mom? What's happening?
Sarah climbed the steps and pulled her daughter into a hug.
Nothing, baby. Just some people who had the wrong address. Come on, let's finish that puzzle we started.
But the damage was already spreading. By evening, Sarah's phone exploded with calls from board members, investors, and business associates. The Boston Globe hadn't published anything yet, but rumors were circulating. CEO distracted by personal issues, leadership in question, Thornton Biomed stock dropping 2% on speculation alone. Margaret called at 7 p.m. Sarah almost ignored it, but knew avoidance would only make things worse. Mother, I warned you this would happen. You prioritized personal indulgence over professional responsibility, and now the company is paying the price.
You leaked information to the press. You orchestrated this entire situation. I made strategic decisions to protect Thornton Biomed from a CEO who's clearly unable to separate personal life from business obligations. The board will meet tomorrow morning to discuss your position. Another emergency meeting, another attempt to force Sarah out. Except this time, Margaret had public opinion and stock prices on her side. Fine. 10 a.m. I'll be there. Bring your nurse if you'd like. I'm sure the board would enjoy meeting the man who's become so important to you. The line went dead. Sarah stood in her bedroom, holding the phone, feeling the walls close in. She'd won the vote on AR-47's timeline, but Margaret had changed the battlefield. This wasn't about drug safety anymore. It was about fitness for leadership, about whether Sarah could be trusted to put the company first. A knock on her doorframe made her turn. Michael stood there with 2 mugs of tea, one of which he handed to her. I heard. The walls in this house are about as soundproof as the ER. She's going to destroy me. Tomorrow morning, she'll present evidence that I've been neglecting duties, show the stock decline, argue that I'm emotionally unstable. The board will vote to remove me. Will they? Sarah sank onto the edge of her bed. 8-2 last time. But that was before the press attention, before the stock dropped, before Margaret framed this as a choice between the company's future and my personal life. Michael sat in the chair across from her, maintaining careful distance. Can I ask you something? Do you want to be CEO? The question surprised her. Of course. I've worked my entire career for this position. That's not what I asked. Do you want it? Not because your father built a company, not because your mother expects it, not because you have something to prove. Do you actually want to spend your life making decisions about drug trials and quarterly earnings and board politics? Sarah opened her mouth to say yes, then stopped. 2 weeks ago, she would have answered instantly. The CEO position was everything, the culmination of 15 years of sacrifice, proof that she'd succeeded on her own merits, validation that Margaret's harsh upbringing had created strength rather than damage. But now, after spending days learning to care for her daughter, cooking meals in her own kitchen, finding satisfaction in mastering nebulizer techniques rather than hostile takeover strategies, after discovering that the opinions of a working-class nurse mattered more to her than the approval of Ivy League board members? I don't know anymore. Then tomorrow's meeting isn't about defending your position. It's about deciding what you actually want your life to look like. Michael stood and moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I've seen you be a CEO. You're brilliant at it. Strategic, decisive, commanding. But I've also seen you be a mom. And Sarah, you're even better at that.
After he left, Sarah sat alone with her tea and thought about the woman she'd been 3 weeks ago. That Sarah never questioned her path, never doubted her priorities, never wondered if success might look different than Margaret had defined it. That Sarah was gone, replaced by someone who understood that the most important meetings happened at 3 a.m. with a nebulizer and a frightened child. The question was whether the board would accept this new version or demand the return of the old one. Friday morning arrived with autumn rain that matched Sarah's mood. She dressed in her most severe suit, dark charcoal, perfectly tailored, designed to project authority and competence. Her reflection in the mirror looked like the CEO everyone expected. Cold, controlled, untouchable.
But inside, she felt like the woman who'd cried in a hospital room while holding her daughter's hand. Michael was already up when she came downstairs, making breakfast for Lily, despite the early hour. He glanced at Sarah's outfit, and something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or recognition. Full armor this morning. I need every advantage I can get. He poured her coffee without asking how she took it, having learned her preferences through observation. Sarah, you know I'll testify if needed. About Lily's condition, the medical necessity of consistent care, the fact that your presence has directly improved her health outcomes. They'll say you're biased. I'm a licensed medical professional with 15 years of experience. My observations carry weight. Lily shuffled into the kitchen, still in pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Why is everyone up so early? Sarah knelt down to her daughter's level. Mom has an important meeting this morning. Michael's going to take care of you until I get back. Is Grandma Margaret mad at you again? The perceptiveness of 7-year-olds was both remarkable and heartbreaking. Sarah smoothed Lily's hair back from her face. Grandma Margaret and I have different ideas about what's important. But whatever happens today, you're always going to be my most important thing. Okay? Lily threw her arms around Sarah's neck. I love you, Mom. The simple declaration nearly broke Sarah's composure. I love you too, baby. More than anything. The drive to Thornton Biomed headquarters took 30 minutes through rain-slicked streets. Sarah used the time to review her notes, prepare her arguments, mentally rehearse the speech she'd give to justify her choices. But as she rode the elevator to the 15th floor, all her preparation felt inadequate. The conference room was full again, all 12 board members, plus Margaret, holding court like a queen about to pronounce sentence.
Vanessa sat at her right hand, laptop open, clearly prepared to present whatever damaging evidence Margaret had compiled.
Sarah, please, sit.
Her mother's voice was professionally courteous, which somehow made it worse than open hostility. Sarah took her seat and met each board member's eyes in turn. Some looked uncomfortable, others looked curious. Robert Price looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. We're here to discuss serious concerns about leadership stability and decision-making at Thornton Biomed. Margaret stood and activated the presentation screen. The first slide showed stock prices over the past 2 weeks, a steady decline that coincided with Sarah's absence from the office. Since our CEO chose to prioritize personal matters over corporate responsibilities, shareholder value has decreased by 4%. That represents billions in market capitalization. The next slide showed tabloid-style photographs, Michael entering the guest house, Sarah and Michael in the garden, Lily visible in several frames. The images were innocuous, but the implications were clear. Furthermore, Miss Thornton has entered into an inappropriate employment relationship with a male staff member who now resides on her property. The optics of this arrangement, combined with her frequent absences, raise questions about judgment and priorities. Sarah forced herself to remain calm, to channel the executive persona that had served her for 15 years. Those photographs were taken on private property without permission, which constitutes invasion of privacy. The employment relationship you're referencing is with a licensed respiratory therapist hired to manage my daughter's severe asthma, a medical condition that resulted in 4 hospitalizations in 6 months. Margaret smiled thinly. No one questions your devotion to your daughter, Sarah. We question whether you can maintain that devotion while effectively leading a Fortune 500 company. The two appear to be mutually exclusive. Why? The single word stopped Margaret mid-presentation. Sarah stood, abandoning her notes and her prepared speech. I'm asking seriously, Mother. Why can't I be both? Why does being a good mother make me a bad CEO? Because you couldn't balance both? Because you chose the company over family and need to believe that was the only possible choice? The room went silent. No one had ever challenged Margaret's choices this directly, least of all her own daughter. Sarah turned to address the board. My father built this company on a principle that pharmaceutical development should prioritize patient welfare over profit. When he died, my mother transformed Thornton Biomed into a profit-maximizing machine. Successful, yes. Ethical, debatable. Dr. Patel leaned forward. Sarah, where are you going with this? I'm going to the heart of what this board needs to decide. Do you want a CEO who follows my mother's model? Profits first, always, regardless of human cost? Or do you want a CEO who remembers that our medications go into real people's bodies, children, parents, people who trust us with their lives? She pulled up her own presentation on the laptop she'd brought. The first slide showed Lily in the hospital bed, oxygen mask obscuring her small face. This is my daughter, 7 years old, severe persistent asthma. She takes our medications every single day and trusts that we've tested them thoroughly enough that they won't hurt her. The next slide showed AR-47 trial data, not sanitized statistics, but case studies. Real children with names and ages and families. These are the kids who participated in our trials. 8% of them experienced adverse reactions. That's not just a number. That's Tommy Rodriguez, who developed tachycardia, Emma Chen, who had respiratory depression, Marcus Williams, who needed hospitalization. She looked directly at Margaret. You want to rush this drug to market to beat GenMed's timeline? I understand the business logic, but I've looked into my daughter's eyes while she struggled to breathe, and I will not gamble with other parents' children for the sake of quarterly earnings. The silence that followed felt different than before, thoughtful rather than shocked. Robert Price cleared his throat. Sarah, no one's questioning your ethics, but the stock decline is temporary. We've weathered worse. And when AR-47 launches with a safety profile that's truly bulletproof, with diagnostic testing that ensures every child benefits, our reputation will be worth more than any short-term stock bump. Vanessa spoke for the first time. And your personal life? The employee living on your property? The time away from the office? Sarah met the younger woman's challenging gaze. Michael Cooper is a medical professional managing my daughter's chronic illness. His presence has kept Lily out of the hospital for 2 weeks, the longest stretch in 6 months. As for time away from the office, I've attended every critical meeting, made every essential decision, and managed this company effectively while also being present for my child. If this board believes those priorities are incompatible, then you need a different CEO. She sat down, heart pounding, having just made the most honest speech of her career. Margaret's face had gone rigid with anger. Vanessa looked stunned. But Dr. Patel was nodding. I'd like to make a motion. All in favor of CEO Thornton's continued leadership with no restrictions on her management of personal and professional responsibilities? The vote took 5 minutes. When it was done, 10 hands were raised. Only Margaret and Vanessa abstained. Margaret stood abruptly, gathering her materials. This is a mistake. You're allowing sentiment to override sound business judgment.
No, Mother. We're allowing humanity to inform our business practices. There's a difference. Her mother left without another word, heels clicking against marble in a retreat that sounded like fury. Vanessa hesitated, then followed. The remaining board members began filing out, several stopping to congratulate Sarah or shake her hand. Robert Price was last to leave. That took courage. Your father would have been proud. The words hit harder than Sarah expected. She'd spent so many years trying to prove herself worthy of David Thornton's legacy while conforming to Margaret's demands. Maybe the real legacy wasn't the company at all. It was the principle behind it. Sarah drove home through clearing skies, feeling lighter than she had in years. She'd won, but more importantly, she'd defined victory on her own terms. Not Margaret's definition, not the board's expectations, but her own understanding of what mattered. Michael's Civic was still in the driveway when she arrived. She found him and Millie in the backyard, examining something in the grass. Her daughter wore rain boots and a jacket, her inhaler clipped to her belt loop, looking healthier than she had in months. "Mom, look! Michael found a salamander!" The creature was small and orange, completely fascinating to a 7-year-old. Sarah crouched down beside them, not caring about her expensive suit or the damp grass. "He's beautiful." Michael glanced at her, reading something in her expression. "How'd it go?" "I still have a job. 10 to 2. 10 to 2 is better than 8 to 2. Sounds like you're gaining ground." Lily held the salamander gently in her palms, marveling at its tiny feet. "Can we keep him?" "No, sweetheart. Wild things belong outside. We can observe him, but then we let him go back to his home." "Like Douglas?" "Douglas is a domesticated frog bred for captivity. This guy," Michael gestured to the salamander, "needs to be free." After they'd released the salamander back into the garden and Lily had gone inside to wash up for lunch, Sarah and Michael stood in the yard watching clouds break apart over the Massachusetts countryside. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have. You just needed someone to believe in you first." The statement hung between them, weighted with all the things they'd been carefully not saying for 2 weeks. Sarah turned to face him fully. "Michael, I need to tell you something." He looked wary, like someone bracing for impact. "Okay." "When I hired you, I told myself it was purely professional. Lily needed a respiratory specialist. You were qualified. End of story. But somewhere between nebulizer lessons and board meeting speeches, that stopped being true." "Sarah, let me finish. I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable or honest about feelings. Margaret trained me to see emotions as weaknesses." "But you've shown me that caring about people isn't weak. It's the strongest thing we can do." She took a breath, committing to honesty even though every instinct screamed to protect herself. "I care about you. Not as Lily's nurse or my employee, but as a person who makes me want to be better, who challenges me and supports me and sees me as more than just a CEO or Margaret's daughter." Michael's expression was unreadable. "You're my employer. There's a power dynamic here that makes any personal relationship complicated." "I know, which is why I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know." The silence stretched long enough to be painful. Then Michael stepped closer, his hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I care about you too. From the first day in the hospital, when you showed up terrified, but trying so hard to be strong for Lily. From every nebulizer lesson where you absorbed information like your daughter's life depended on it. Because it did. From watching you stand up to your mother and choose being a good parent over being a perfect CEO." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But you're right about the complications. You're my boss.
If this goes wrong, I lose my job and Lily loses consistent medical care. The stakes are too high. So what do? We take it slow. We're honest with each other. And we remember that Lily comes first. Always. Sarah nodded, feeling simultaneously relieved and frustrated. Slow meant not rushing into something that could implode. It also meant more nights alone, wondering what might happen if they were brave enough to cross the remaining boundaries. Lily called from the house, breaking the moment. "Mom! Michael! Lunch is ready!" Mrs. Patterson had prepared sandwiches, her disapproval evident in the precise way she'd cut them into triangles. Sarah thanked her anyway, determined to be gracious despite the house manager's obvious judgment. After lunch, Michael retreated to the guest house to catch up on sleep after several nights of interrupted rest monitoring Lily. Sarah used the time to field calls from board members and investors, reassuring them that Thornton Biomed remained stable despite the week's drama. Dr. Patel called at 3 p.m. with news. "Sarah, I wanted you to know, Margaret's threatening to sell her shares. She's approached several potential buyers, including Robert Price. If he buys her 30%, combined with his existing holdings, he'd have enough to challenge your control. Not majority, but enough to be a problem." Sarah felt the familiar tension return to her shoulders. "Can we block the sale?" "Not legally. She owns those shares outright. But I'm making calls to our institutional investors, reminding them why your leadership matters. We might be able to dilute the impact." The rest of the afternoon passed in phone calls and strategy sessions. By dinner time, Sarah had secured verbal commitments from enough shareholders to maintain her position even if Margaret sold to Robert. It wasn't ideal, but it was survivable. Michael emerged from the guest house at 6 with an observation. "You've been on the phone for 3 hours straight. When's the last time you took a break?" "I'm fine." "You're running yourself into the ground. Your daughter needs you healthy, not burned out." He was right. Annoyingly so. Sarah closed her laptop and stood, stretching muscles that had cramped from sitting too long. "What do you suggest?" "Walk. Fresh air. 20 minutes away from screens and business calls." They left Lily with Mrs. Patterson, who accepted the responsibility with martyred reluctance, and walked the grounds together as evening settled over the property. The gardens that Sarah had barely noticed in 2 years of living here were beautiful in autumn twilight, maple leaves blazing red and gold. "How much land do you have?" 4 acres. My father loved gardening. After he died, I hired a service to maintain it, but I never come out here anymore." "Why not?" "Because it reminds me of him. Of Sunday mornings when he dragged me out of bed to help plant bulbs or prune roses. I was terrible at it, always impatient, wanting to get back to my homework or piano practice, things that would look good on college applications." "Did he mind?" "I don't know. I never asked." They walked in silence through the formal gardens, past the reflecting pool where koi swam lazy circles. Michael bent to examine a late-blooming rose, his fingers gentle on the petals. "My dad was a mechanic. Used to say that working with your hands keeps you honest. No hiding behind words or theories. Either the engine runs or it doesn't." "You miss him." "Every day. He died when I was 33. Lung cancer from 40 years of smoking. Spent his last 6 months in a hospital bed, and I couldn't do anything except watch him fade." Sarah heard the guilt underneath the words, recognized it because she carried the same weight about her own father. "We both lost our dads to work they loved. Mine to a heart attack at his desk, yours to cancer from the job. And we both ended up in healthcare. Maybe we're trying to save the people we couldn't save before." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Sarah had never articulated why she'd chosen pharmaceutical development over other business paths, but Michael's words resonated with truth she'd buried for years. Do you think we ever stop trying? To save them? No. But maybe we learn to save other people instead. Make their sacrifice mean something. They completed the circuit of the gardens and returned to the house as darkness fell completely. Lily was at the kitchen table with Mrs. Patterson, working on homework with the determined focus that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. "Mom, I got an A on my science quiz, the one about respiratory systems." The pride in her daughter's voice made Sarah's chest tight. "Of course you did. You're brilliant." Michael helped. He explained about alveoli and gas exchange. Mr. Cooper is an excellent teacher. The praise was sincere, but Mrs. Patterson's tone suggested it was also a warning. Don't get too attached to the help. They never stay. Sarah chose to ignore the subtext. That night, after Lily's evening treatment and bedtime stories, Sarah stood at her bedroom window, watching lights in the guest house. Michael was probably reading medical journals or calling his mother at the care facility, living his quiet life separate from the drama that consumed Sarah's world. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a single photograph. Michael and Sarah in the garden that afternoon, his hand touching the rose, her watching him with an expression that anyone could read. Below the image, "Tomorrow's Globe, thought you should know. V." Vanessa. Of course. If Margaret's direct assault had failed, she'd use her protégé for guerrilla warfare. The photograph itself was innocent, but the optics of a CEO and her male employee strolling romantic gardens would be devastating. Sarah forwarded the image to Michael with a brief message. "We're on tomorrow's front page. Margaret won't stop." His response came immediately. "Then we stop hiding. Your truth beat her lies before. It'll work again." Simple words, but they steadied something in Sarah's chest. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Saturday morning brought the Boston Globe as promised. The article was on page 3 of the business section, not front page, but prominent enough. The headline read, "Thornton Biomed CEO's unconventional work-life balance raises questions." The piece was carefully worded to avoid libel while maximizing insinuation. It detailed Sarah's absences from the office, the stock decline, the employment of Michael Cooper, and the unusual living arrangements at her Wellesley estate. It quoted unnamed board members expressing concern about judgment and priorities. What it didn't mention was the 10-2 vote supporting her leadership, the medical necessity of Lily's care, or the fact that Sarah had successfully defended her position through transparency rather than manipulation. Michael appeared at the kitchen door with his own copy of the paper. "We should address this directly." "How?" "Interview. On our terms. Tell the whole story. Lily's illness, my qualifications, your decision to prioritize family without abandoning professional responsibilities. Control the narrative before your mother spins it further." Sarah considered the risk. Public interviews could backfire, especially when personal life intersected with corporate leadership, but silence would let Margaret's version become the accepted truth. Who would we talk to? Someone who values substance over scandal. There's a reporter at the Boston Business Journal who covers healthcare, Emma Martinez. I've read her work. She's fair. You've thought about this. I've been preparing for Margaret's next move since the first reporters showed up. Your mother's predictable once you understand her patterns. The observation was astute and slightly disturbing. Michael had spent 2 weeks in their orbit and already understood Margaret better than Sarah did after 36 years. Set up the interview. But Michael, this will expose your life too.
Everything about your background, your divorce, your mother's illness? Are you prepared for that? I've got nothing to hide, and I'm tired of people assuming that working-class nurses are somehow less professional than Ivy League executives.
Emma Martinez agreed to meet them that afternoon at a coffee shop in Cambridge, neutral territory away from Thornton Biomed headquarters and the Wellesley mansion. She was younger than Sarah expected, mid-30s, with the sharp eyes of someone who'd learned to spot deception professionally.
Thank you for agreeing to this. I appreciate the opportunity for the real story. The Glow piece was heavy on speculation, light on facts. They spent 90 minutes walking Emma through everything. Lily's medical history, the 4 hospitalizations, Sarah's realization that she'd failed her daughter, Michael's qualifications, and the legitimate medical need for his presence. Sarah showed the reporter Lily's treatment logs, Michael's credentials, documentation of improved health outcomes since his hiring. Emma took notes rapidly, occasionally asking clarifying questions. At the end, she set down her pen. This is a completely different narrative than what's been reported, but I have to ask, is there any truth to the rumors about a romantic relationship between you two? Sarah glanced at Michael. They'd agreed beforehand to be completely honest. We care about each other. We've been transparent about that. But our relationship is currently professional, focused on Lily's welfare. If it develops into something more in the future, that's our personal business and has no bearing on my ability to lead Thornton Biomed. Michael added, I've worked in healthcare for 15 years. I've seen plenty of doctors marry nurses, administrators marry physicians, colleagues develop relationships while maintaining professionalism. The only reason this is news is because Sarah's a woman CEO and I'm a male nurse. If the genders were reversed, nobody would care. Emma smiled. That's a good point. I'll include it. The article published Tuesday morning online, print edition Wednesday. Emma Martinez had done exactly what she'd promised, presented facts without sensationalism, included quotes from Dr. Rodriguez about Lily's improved health, and contextualized the story within broader questions about work-life balance for female executives. The headline read, When CEOs Choose Family, Sarah Thornton's Fight to Redefine Leadership. Public response was mixed, but surprisingly supportive. Several business publications picked up the story, praising Sarah's transparency. Working mothers shared the article on social media with comments about the impossible expectations placed on women in leadership. A few critics called her decision unprofessional, but they were outnumbered. More importantly, Thornton Biomed's stock stabilized and began recovering. Institutional investors issued statements supporting current leadership. 2 board members who'd seemed uncertain called to express confidence in Sarah's direction. Margaret, predictably, called to express fury. You've turned this company into a public spectacle. Your father would be ashamed. No, Mother. Dad would be proud that I chose family over your approval. That's what you can't forgive. Not that I'm prioritizing Lily, but that I'm doing it successfully. The line went dead. Sarah wondered if Margaret would ever understand that strength came in forms beyond ruthless efficiency. November brought rhythm and routine. Lily's health stabilized under Michael's consistent care. Sarah established new work patterns, office time when essential, remote work when possible, absolute boundaries around family hours. The board adapted, meetings rescheduled, expectations adjusted. More surprising was Margaret's response. She didn't sell her shares after all. Instead, she retreated from active involvement in company affairs, maintaining her board position, but no longer attending every meeting or challenging every decision. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was détente. One Wednesday afternoon, Sarah received an unexpected call from the care facility where Linda Cooper lived. Michael's mother had taken a turn for the worse, pneumonia complicated by Parkinson's immobility. He'd left work immediately, his face ashen with worry. Sarah found him at Massachusetts General Hospital that evening, sitting in another waiting room with the exhausted posture of someone who'd spent too many hours in these chairs.
How is she? Stable, for now. Antibiotics seem to be working, but her doctor says the Parkinson's is progressing faster than expected. She might need to move to full nursing care. I'm sorry. Michael rubbed his face with both hands. I knew this was coming. Doesn't make it easier. Sarah sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. What can I do? You're here. That's enough.
They sat in silence while hospital machinery beeped in distant rooms, and exhausted staff moved through hallways on the endless cycle of caring for people who couldn't care for themselves. You know what the worst part is? I'm a nurse. I specialize in respiratory care. But I can't fix this. I can manage symptoms, make her comfortable, but I can't stop the disease from taking her. That's not failure, Michael. That's being human. Doesn't feel human. Feels helpless. Sarah took his hand, threading their fingers together. You've spent your entire adult life helping other people, taking care of your mom, treating patients, teaching me to care for Lily. When do you get to be the one receiving care? He turned to look at her fully, something vulnerable and raw in his expression. Is that what this is? You taking care of me? If you'll let me. The kiss happened naturally, inevitable, like water finding its level. Michael's hand came up to cup her face. Sarah's fingers tangled in his shirt. And for 30 seconds, the hospital and the waiting and the fear all disappeared into the simple truth that they needed each other. When they broke apart, Michael rested his forehead against hers. This is probably a terrible idea. Probably. Do you care? Not even a little bit. Linda Cooper recovered from the pneumonia, but the incident accelerated decisions about her care. Michael moved her to a facility that specialized in advanced Parkinson's, spending his days off helping her settle into a new room and adjusting to increased assistance with daily activities. Sarah went with him on the second visit, bringing Lily along. Her daughter was nervous at first. Hospitals and care facilities meant sickness and scary machines. But Linda Cooper's face, when she saw Lily, transformed with such joy that the fear evaporated. You must be the little girl Michael talks about constantly. He says you're very brave. Lily glanced at Michael, who nodded encouragement. I have asthma, but Mr. Mike taught Mom how to take care of me, so now I don't have to go to the hospital as much. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Taking care of people is what the Coopers do best. The older woman's hands shook with tremors she couldn't control, but her smile was warm and genuine. Sarah watched Michael with his mother, gentle, patient, heartbreakingly tender, and understood where he'd learned to care. Before they left, Linda pulled Sarah aside while Michael helped Lily feed fish in the facility's aquarium. He cares about you. Really cares. I haven't seen him this happy since before Jennifer left. I care about him too. Good. My son spent too long with a woman who made him feel small. Don't do that to him. The warning was delivered kindly but firmly. Sarah met the older woman's eyes, the same warm brown as Michael's, and made a promise. I won't. He makes me want to be better, and I'll spend however long we have making sure he knows his value. Linda nodded, satisfied. Then you have my blessing, for whatever that's worth. Thanksgiving arrived with the first real snow of winter. Sarah had always outsourced the holiday, reservations at expensive restaurants, catered meals at the mansion, anything to avoid the domestic labor her mother had disdained. This year, she decided to cook. Michael found her at 6 a.m. reading cooking blogs with mounting panic. I have no idea what I'm doing.
The turkey weighs 20 pounds. How do I even begin to cook 20 pounds of anything? Step 1, coffee. Step 2, breathe. Step 3, let me help. They spent the day in the kitchen together, Michael patiently guiding Sarah through techniques she'd never learned. Lily contributed by making place cards and centerpieces, her artistic efforts more enthusiastic than skilled, but perfect in their imperfection. Mrs. Patterson appeared mid-afternoon with visible disapproval. Mrs. Thornton, I could have handled the meal preparation. You needn't struggle with it yourself. I'm not struggling, Mrs. Patterson. I'm learning. There's a difference. The house manager retreated, but not before Sarah caught the tiniest hint of approval in her expression. Perhaps even Mrs. Patterson could appreciate effort, if not execution. The meal itself was imperfect. Turkey slightly dry, stuffing too salty, gravy lumpy. But Lily declared it the best Thanksgiving ever, and Michael's laughter when the cranberry sauce came out in a perfect can-shaped cylinder made every mistake worthwhile. After dinner, with Lily occupied by a movie, Sarah and Michael cleaned up together in comfortable silence. The domestic intimacy felt more significant than any corporate achievement Sarah had earned. I never thought I'd find this. Find what? Contentment. Peace. A life that feels like mine, instead of something I'm performing for an audience. Michael set down the dish he'd been drying and turned to face her. You're not performing anymore. You're living. There's a difference. Sarah moved into his arms, resting her head against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. When did you become the wisest person I know? Probably around the same time you became brave enough to choose happiness over approval. December brought the final confrontation with Margaret. Sarah's mother requested a meeting at the mansion, formal and scheduled rather than the ambush tactics she'd favored previously. Sarah agreed, curious about what Margaret wanted. Her mother arrived precisely on time, wearing a coat that cost more than Michael's car. Mrs. Patterson showed her to the study where Sarah waited, professional distance maintained despite the family relationship. Mother, thank you for coming. Margaret sat in the leather chair across from Sarah's desk, posture perfect, expression unreadable. I wanted to discuss the AR-47 timeline. Dr. Patel believes you'll be ready for FDA submission in March. That's correct. The companion diagnostic testing has been successful beyond our projections. I've reviewed the data. It's solid work, better than I'd anticipated. The admission cost Margaret something. Sarah could see it in the tightness around her mouth. Praise didn't come easily to a woman who'd built an empire on impossible standards. Thank you. The team has worked incredibly hard. Margaret folded her hands in her lap, the gesture controlled and precise. I owe you an apology. The words were so unexpected that Sarah almost asked her mother to repeat them. Margaret didn't apologize. She justified, explained, rationalized, but never admitted fault. I raised you to believe that success required sacrifice, that to be strong, you had to be hard, that love was a weakness that would destroy everything you'd built. That's what you modeled, yes. I was wrong. Sarah's breath caught. Her mother's face remained impassive, but her voice carried something that might have been regret. Your father tried to tell me. He said we could have both, the company and each other, success and family, strength and love. I told him he was naive, that the world didn't work that way. And then he died trying to prove you wrong. Yes. He worked himself to death, attempting to show me that compassion and competence weren't mutually exclusive. I responded by becoming even harder, even colder. I convinced myself that his death proved my point, that caring too much destroys you. Margaret stood and walked to the window, looking out over the gardens where David Thornton had spent his Sunday mornings. But watching you these past 2 months, I've realized something. You've succeeded where I failed. You've built a life that includes both professional excellence and personal connection. You chose family without abandoning responsibility. You found strength I never had. Sarah didn't trust herself to speak. This version of Margaret, vulnerable, honest, admitting error, was so foreign that it felt like talking to a stranger. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see what you've accomplished, and your father would be proud. The words broke something open in Sarah's chest, tears spilling before she could stop them. Her mother turned from the window, and for the first time in Sarah's memory, Margaret's eyes were wet too. I don't know how to be the mother you needed. I never learned how to express love without making it conditional on achievement. But I'm asking, is it too late to try? Sarah crossed the room and did something she hadn't done since childhood. She hugged her mother.
Margaret stood rigid for a moment. Then her arms came up hesitantly, awkwardly, to return the embrace. It's not too late. But Mother, you have to actually try. Not just say the words, but show up. Be present. Let Lily know her grandmother is a person, not just a formidable board member. I'll try. I can't promise I'll be good at it. None of us are good at it. We just do our best and hope it's enough. When Margaret left an hour later, she paused at the door. Your young man, Michael, he makes you happy? Yes. Then I approve. Not that my approval matters. It does. It always has. That's something I'm working on changing, but for now, yes, it matters. Christmas morning arrived with 3 feet of snow and the kind of magical white landscape that made even jaded New Englanders pause to appreciate beauty. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and pancakes, following the scent downstairs to find Michael already in the kitchen with Lily. Mom! Santa came! And he brought Douglas a bigger tank!
The frog's upgraded habitat sat in the living room, complete with live plants and a miniature waterfall. Michael had clearly stayed up late assembling it, and the joy on Lily's face made every hour worthwhile. The morning unfolded with presents and laughter. Michael's gift to Sarah a first-edition copy of her father's favorite book with an inscription in his neat handwriting. For the strongest person I know, who finally learned that strength includes softness. Sarah's gift to him was simpler, keys to the guest house, made official. You're not just staff anymore. This is your home, for as long as you want it. His kiss in response told her he understood what she was really saying. I love you. Stay. Margaret arrived at noon with gifts for Lily and an awkward attempt at warmth that was obviously uncomfortable but genuinely meant. She played board games with her granddaughter, complimented Sarah's cooking with only minimal critique, and treated Michael with cautious respect. Progress, not perfection. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed and Margaret had departed, Sarah and Michael stood on the back terrace watching snow fall over the gardens. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, both of them warm despite the cold. 1 year ago, I was homeless in a hospital waiting room, wondering if my daughter would survive the night. And now? Now I'm standing in a garden with the woman I love, who also happens to be the most intimidating CEO in Boston, watching snow fall on the best Christmas I've ever had. Sarah tilted her head back to look at him. You love me? Completely. Terrifyingly. The kind of love that makes me want to fix everything for you, even though I know you're perfectly capable of fixing things yourself. I love you too. The kind that makes me want to be a better person, better mother, better human being, because you see possibilities in me I never saw in myself. The kiss was slow and sweet, full of promise rather than urgency. When they broke apart, Michael's smile was the one that transformed his whole face. So where do we go from here? Wherever we want. Together.
6 months later, Sarah stood before the FDA approval panel presenting AR-47 and its companion diagnostic test. The years of additional testing, the delayed timeline, the conflicts with her mother, all of it came down to this moment. The panel asked hard questions. Sarah answered with data, with honesty, with transparency about the 8% who wouldn't benefit and how the diagnostic test would identify them before treatment began. She spoke about Tommy Rodriguez and Emma Chen and Marcus Williams, the trial participants who'd experienced complications, and how those children had made the final product better. When the vote came, it was unanimous approval. AR-47 would launch in January, with safety protocols that set new industry standards.
Sarah called Michael from the conference room, hearing Lily's excited squeals in the background when he answered.
We got approval. I never doubted you. Lily, say congratulations to your mom. Her daughter's voice came through clear and strong, breathing easy, healthy, alive. Great job, Mom! Can we celebrate with pizza? Anything you want, baby. That night, the three of them sat in the kitchen eating pizza straight from the box, Douglas the frog watching from his tank, snow falling gently outside the windows. Sarah looked at her daughter, thriving under consistent care and parental presence, at Michael, who'd taught her that strength came in unexpected forms, at the life she'd built by choosing people over profits, love over approval, happiness over her mother's limited definition of success. This is who I was supposed to become.
Not Margaret's perfect successor, not a CEO who sacrificed everything for quarterly earnings, but a woman who understood that the most important work happens not in boardrooms, but in moments like this. Michael reached across the table and took her hand. What are you thinking? That I used to measure success in stock prices and market share. Now I measure it in healthy daughter and peaceful evenings, and partnerships built on trust instead of transactions. Lily, oblivious to the adult conversation, was feeding Douglas and narrating the frog's thoughts in different voices. Michael squeezed Sarah's hand gently. Your father would be proud of what you've built. Not just the company, the life. Especially the life. Later, after Lily was asleep and Michael had returned to the guest house, Sarah stood at her bedroom window one last time. The lights across the garden were still on. Michael, reading probably, or calling his mother at the facility. Tomorrow he'd move his things into the main house. They'd agreed the separation had become absurd when he spent every evening here anyway, and Lily had started asking why Mr. Mike had to sleep so far away. Tomorrow, Sarah would officially announce her engagement to the board, not asking permission, simply informing them of personal news. Some would disapprove. Most would adapt. All of them would have to accept that their CEO had redefined success on her own terms. Tomorrow she'd call her father's grave and tell him about AR-47's approval, about Lily's health, about finding love with a man who saw value in caring rather than conquering. But tonight, she was simply grateful for the crisis that had broken her open, for the nurse who taught her that the strongest thing anyone could do was choose to love, for the daughter who'd needed her mother to be present more than perfect, for the life she'd almost missed by following someone else's blueprint for success. Sarah Thornton had been raised to believe that emotions were weaknesses, that sacrifice was strength, that the only measure of worth was professional achievement. It had taken hitting bottom, homeless daughter in an ER, CEO position threatened, life spiraling out of control, to discover the truth. The strongest people weren't the ones who never fell. They were the ones brave enough to admit they'd fallen and ask for help getting back up. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the person who helped you stand became the person you wanted to stand beside forever.